If I tell people I've lived here, 27 years ago, oh, you're Singaporean, and I'm like, I mean, yes. it's like I know everything, how it works and stuff like this.
Meet Allen Meek, an American living in Singapore for 27 years. He plays principal trombone in the Singapore Symphony Orchestra and teaches at the National University of Singapore. Allen explained why Singapore is the Beverly Hills of Southeast Asia, the reasons he feels so lucky to live here, and the biggest differences between being a musician in Singapore and the US. I'm Max Chernov, let's go!
I've lived here over half my life, so
yeah.
I'm 51 now, and I moved here when I was 24. It's amazing because I never thought I'd be here more than like a year or 2 years.
That's what actually many people say, like I come for just 1 year, 2 year assignment, and then I stayed forever.
Yeah, it's just, it's one of those things. It's very different than 97 too, because none of this was built. This is just kind of reclaimed land. And I lived actually downtown. I lived at Riverwalk Apartments right at Boat Key.
Yeah.
And I faced this way. So I watched this place be built, and I watched MBS the entire time be built.
Nice.
And I remember it took forever for them to put that boat on top. I was like, what are they going to finish this thing? Like, what is it going to look like, And the other part was they spent so much time just banging the ground because it's reclaimed land to make sure it was solid enough. And I remember when they moved the Merlion fish used to be further down, and this used to be just ocean. This is reclaimed land, so it's pretty incredible what they've done here. Now they're going to build this Coney Island off the East Coast. So I have no idea what that's going to be like. It's amazing to see original Singapore, which was bordered by jungle and forest and stuff. Like if you look at old photos or whatever of Kallang River in the 1800s, it's that was the main river. That was a massive river. This is just kind of a trade river, and lots of crocodiles, just lush forests and stuff like that. Now you go to Kallang River and it's just kind of corralled within. It doesn't just looks like a canal. It doesn't look anything like how it used to be. It's interesting to see how much the island itself has actually grown. Since I've been here, let alone build all these. I think when I first moved here in '98, it was January '98. The building near Bugis that looks like this, it was called the Gateway. And that was literally because it's just ocean and that was the gate. And then Suntec City was the palm, with the fountain of wealth in the middle.
Yeah.
And that was one of the only things on the reclaimed land here. So it is pretty fascinating what they've done with the land here. And I think that's part of the success. So.
What are the non-obvious changes? Not like MBS was built, but something hidden. Maybe people don't realize that it's changed. I don't know, the vibe, the society, or something not super obvious.
There's one thing I can think of immediately. So when I first moved here, China was just starting to get a little bit more and more power. I remember everybody saying the dragon has awakened. And Singapore's been tied to America for a long time, and the West in general. People were saying China's going to be the next big superpower, and they're going to hitch the wagon to that star. That has not happened. So, it happened in a different way if it did happen, but it hasn't quite happened then. But now there's a lot of, it's funny, the Chinese Singaporeans, which is, predominantly Chinese in Singapore, as much as they used to embrace China, now they've kind of shunned China, and they like to create that chasm and difference between the people. And I think that's the most obvious one.
What do you feel when you come back to the US and when you're back to Singapore?
So when I go back to the US, I definitely feel, especially spending most of my life here now, when I go back, I just observe, I definitely feel how that's changed too in all these years, but particularly from being from DC, it's a very transient city because it's a governmental city. So it kind of changes with each new administration, this kind of thing. I know how it works back home. It's easy. But being from DC, you get a real kind of vibe of what's going on in the country because you're so close to the head of politics there. Right now it's not good. Coming back here is in the sense that everything works. It's comfortable. We've got to deal with the humidity again, but then again, I was thinking right before I left, it was like 37 degrees, because it's getting this heat wave, and I think it's only going to get hotter and hotter. So people have always complained about how hot Singapore is, but Actually, compared to how it was back home, I mean, actually the weather's been better here. Yeah, it's okay. Both places are, they work. I'm blessed to be from a good area in Northern Virginia, and things work there too.
Imagine having a personal assistant right in your ears. And this is possible with the VIAIM Nano Plus. These earphones transcribe videos, meetings, calls, and live events. For example, if you have many online meetings like I do, it can be hard to remember everything discussed. VIAIM Nano Plus transcribes the conversation in real time and can summarize with a to-do list afterward. This way you won't miss any important detail. With up to 11 countries' language options for translation and transcription, the VIAIM Nano Plus can help you communicate with locals while traveling or understand your kids speaking Mandarin. Start enhancing your work and life with VIAIM Nano Plus. Use the exclusive code PICVIAIM891 and enjoy discount more than 10% off the original price. Shop during the Singapore National Day promo for extra discounts. And now let's get back to the video.
I think socially the biggest difference is when I'm home, it's a lot easier to meet and talk with people. People are friendlier, people say hi and this kind of stuff. Singapore, like a lot of big cities, they don't necessarily say hi. And conversations aren't as easy necessarily, but that doesn't mean that the people aren't lovely in their own way. So
Yeah, here is different. Yeah, you need to adjust for sure.
You need to adjust, but honestly, I mean, if I really answer your question, I've done both for so long that it's kind of like wearing two different pants, and I go, oh, it's time to wear this pair, and it's time to wear this pair. And then combined with the jet lag, which from my home is about 12 or 13 hours difference depending on the time of the year. Everything's kind of out of whack. So by the time you get in whack, you're kind of used to being back. The other thing is where I live is very close to mountains, and it's very easy to go out hiking and a lot of nature and this kind of stuff. You just want to be outside alone. That's very easy. Singapore, I mean, I think all the time, and now I live next to the nature reserves in the center of Singapore. You just can't really get anywhere where there's not people. It's very crowded, even the nature reserves and stuff like this. So having time alone is very hard here. And I find for me, I need a lot of space. So I think for me personally, this has been one of the harder things about living in Singapore. It's just trying to find that space. And I see a lot of people, I think this happens with a lot of people, especially if you're not traveling, every few months. And I think that's another thing about Singapore. I think you can easily get island fever if you can, like try to get out at least every 3 months, even if it's for just a short trip to like Bali, like you're going to do, or even if it's for a weekend or something like this. Otherwise, it does start to feel a bit claustrophobic here. You just don't really have that space. I mean, apartments, you hear people, and it's just kind of always around. It's not terrible, but it's just, I see a lot of people in the car parks just sitting in their car sometimes, and I'm going, just to have some me time and stuff like this, or in parking lots, and I think that part's got to be one of the harder parts about here. So, but even Lee Kuan Yew himself said it's like, this is kind of a working city. In Singapore, you have to get out. But that's also the beautiful thing about here. It's kind of like, I've always thought to really appreciate Singapore, you have to travel the region. And then you realize, because there's a lot to complain about. And I'm basically, if I tell people I've lived here 27 years ago, oh, you're Singapore, and I'm like, I mean, yes. it's like I know everything, how it works and stuff like this. But but I think he's right in the sense that to put it in perspective, you need to get out, and this really is like the Beverly Hills of the region, and it's amazing how far it's come in such a short amount of time. It's amazing that Singapore compares itself to like big cities like London and these kinds of things. That's quite a high bar. No, it doesn't have the population, but I mean, it's still on the global stage. Bangkok is too, but Bangkok's more of it's a different. Bangkok's Bangkok, more local and this stuff. And if you go to Indonesia, especially, you see how far away that is from Singapore. But at the same time, I mean, if you want nature, this kind of stuff, I mean, you have Borneo, the world's oldest rainforest, amazing dive region. I think. Going back to what I was saying before, like Singapore being originally part of Sunderland, I think that's how you still have to think about it. You have to think about, it's confusing when you look at a globe and on a map, because you see all these islands, and you ask an American who are terrible at geography, Where's Malaysia, no less? No one has any idea. Ask them to point Singapore, they'll go through China trying to find Singapore. But you have to think about this as being like kind of a water nation area and stuff like this. And I think once you have the proper perspective, and if you're able to get out and realize how privileged Singapore is compared to everywhere else in Southeast Asia, you start to feel very lucky to live here. And again, you have Changi Airport, which is the only airport in the world where I like to go there early, and and just relax. I flew here from Dulles Airport in Virginia. It's horrible. It's just every time I'm like, ugh. Other airports I visit, it's just, I was just in Frankfurt and Munich as well. It's just like, it's okay, but it's like, it's not Changi Airport.
It was so strategic actually to build
Very
the nicest
strategic.
airport.
Very much so.
And also, like if you read this book from Lee Kuan Yew, one of the first things that they done, that's the road, that's the highway from the airport to the city center. They planted the flowers, the beautiful flowers. So all the investors from foreign countries, they have this nice feeling when they fly to Changi and then go to the CBD area, to the central, like through this road. And then it's like from the brand perspective, it was like super strategic move.
Right. Did you know also the ECP, the East Coast Parkway, to the airport, when the trees stop, you see a lot of flower planters and stuff.
Yeah.
That's actually an emergency runway. They can move all those flowers, and you can have an emergency runway there.
Yeah, I heard about it.
Yeah. So it's amazing how small this place is, but how modular they've made it. Or like here, they're setting up for F1 now in September already, and. It's amazing they can turn this small city into an F1 track. It is pretty amazing. Yeah, the people behind creating the city have done a pretty amazing job. The other thing about Singapore is I've always kind of thought of it like a sim city. It's like when I came here, there was definitely some disjunct places and things, and it wasn't quite cohesive in the late 90s. But you've seen how they've kind of put things here, and like you said before, KY was saying with Changi, things are very strategic. Everything makes sense, and that part, I think it's a brilliant city, and I think where they're going now, making it a city in nature, I think that's really the right way to go. You see more and more buildings with the foliage going up and this kind of stuff, and the wildlife here is pretty amazing for how small it is. And again, because it used to be part of Sunderland, they used to have Malayan tigers and everything else here, so it is a fascinating place. I think to really understand any place in the world, you have to understand the geography first, and I think the geography helps shape the people, and the people have to work with the geography they have, and if they want to modernize it, they have to try to build with the tools or the environment that's around them. But Singapore's done brilliantly.
There is a nice book called Prisoners of Geography.
Okay.
So that's where it explains how countries they do now and why it's based heavily on like how they geographically
placed.
Like the US basically, no major enemies like Canada here, like you have Mexico, and then the rest of the country. So basically, ocean here, ocean there.
Right.
Really, like different approach to the wars and to the global politics compared to other countries. And basically, you can call it prisoner of geography, or you can call it like being lucky of having the geography and then utilize it in the right way.
Exactly. You said it much better than I did.
What part of you is direct to American, or what part of you is like Singaporean kind of thing? You know what I mean?
My most Singaporean part is that I complain. And like I said before, if I don't get out, at least every few months. Of course, for COVID, I was here for 2 years straight, and this kind of stuff, but a different circumstance. You start to complain. Singapore's amazing. It works well. The infrastructure's as good as anywhere else on the planet. But you do start to notice maybe it's because of the population density and just the habits of people. I always thought you could judge a country by how they drive and how they walk. And if you judge Singapore by how they drive and how they walk, I think that explains Singapore a lot and why you can start to complain. Okay, if you know what I mean?
I know what I mean about driving, but what's wrong with walking?
The walking part. So when I lived at Riverwalk for 10 years, right? I just walked everywhere from the center of town.
Yeah.
And no transportation at the time and stuff like that, because I work here and whatever. People just like to walk in the middle, and if there's like a group of people, they're shoulder to shoulder. And I'll be walking home with groceries and stuff like this, heavy groceries.
Yeah.
And no one's making way for me, And it's just like, what are they thinking? I've seen groups of people, like 5 people, and they're literally shoulder to shoulder, which is very strange, and not giving way to anybody.
And the roads
so it's like there's no kind of lanes for walking. The speed of the walking, very slow, so they're doing that, and they're walking really slow. And I'm being from the East Coast, Mid-Atlantic, and I was in Boston for 6 years before here. I mean, people walk fast, and maybe like where you're from in Russia, I mean, it gets cold. You don't walk slow in the cold, right? So you get used to walking fast.
Yeah.
But I had to realize in this climate, people do walk slow, and that was always hard. It's still hard for me to walk slow.
Yeah.
But then standing shoulder to shoulder and trying to get around was always hard. Escalators. People like to again, shoulder to shoulder. There's no passing on the escalator. I'm just kind of antsy in general, so it's hard for me to just stand on an escalator.
I just have wide shoulders.
Yeah, and I have wide shoulders. Yeah.
Muscles.
so I just kind of like to kind of keep moving, So they don't, but they've gotten a lot better at that. I would say the other thing is talking in doorways, talking at the tops and bottoms of escalators. It's not necessarily walking, but just kind of like, I feel like situational awareness isn't quite what I'm used to from back home.
Like, what do you mean?
Like, in terms of personal space and giving space to strangers.
Right.
If someone meets somebody and they want to have a conversation, they just stop, they talk. It doesn't matter if it's in a doorway or at the bottom of an escalator.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I never thought about it. Okay.
Yeah, and then you're just like, dude, it's like, I mean, you just have to think for like a second, and then you can, So these kind of things, and again, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you're here long enough, these kind of things start to, because it's kind of like basic consideration. And so how I compare the walking with the driving is the consideration part. Singapore is very kiasu, meaning that, it's kind of like me first. But you really see that in cars. I've had a car here, and now I just have a motorbike. I got rid of the car. Every time I was writing a check every month, I was like, oh my God. It's a bit rough still in these ways. And I think that, for me at least, that's the beginning of the frustrations.
Yeah.
And so just kind of moving around and dealing with this kind of stuff. And as Singapore gets more populated, it gets a little bit more convoluted in the sense. Yeah. And you start to feel be considerate. And it's not always there. And that starts to get to you. The other thing would be, I don't know if you've experienced, how long have you been here?
6 years.
6 years. So you've seen how customer service can be sometimes too. And that's like, it's again part of the situational awareness and just kind of like people skills sometimes. That can be a bit frustrating and a bit frustrating. And again, that's kind of a good difference when I go back to the US. It's like just that you don't realize how valuable that is to well-being when things just kind of, when there's basic consideration towards others. So when that doesn't happen and you're here long enough, the complaints start to come out, and then you start to notice all these little things. But again, they're not big. It's just like little mosquito bites, and they just kind of bother you for a while.
Yeah.
But they go away. And if you go somewhere else for a little while, again, you come back and you're like, this place is amazing. And if you're here for too long, you're like, I got to get out of here. So it's kind of like this. But again, like even what I was saying before with why I think he kind of knew this. Singapore it's a money town. It's a working town. Yeah. And in knowing how it fits in the region, it's a city-state, but you can think about it being really a city within the region. And yeah, you have to cross a causeway and take a boat or a plane, but everything is close by, and you have all this around. I mean, you have everything Bangkok, Phuket, Malaysia, all these places have to offer, the amazing archipelago, the Malay archipelago of Indonesia, and this, and you still have Singapore. And if I was going to live anywhere in Asia, I would definitely live in Singapore. But in Southeast Asia, it's a no-brainer, you know. And I've been to Japan many times. Being a musician, I've done tours many places. As much as I love Tokyo and these kinds of places, I mean, living there is another thing. Visiting is one thing. But Singapore is definitely, this is the only place I've been an expat. And I have no regrets. And I can speak English, this kind of thing. Of course, you do pick up Singlish and stuff like this. And if you have some Singaporean girlfriends, you start to pick up Singlish.
Can you code switch to Singlish?
I can understand. Honestly, I mean, I just kind of joked around speaking it. In terms of me speaking it is one thing, but understanding, I can understand most of it. Except for like the abangs and aliangs, when it's really kind of fast and very, very rough, a lot of Hokkien words put in there, that can be tough.
Yeah.
But the good thing about Hokkien is that, as maybe you've experienced, it is one of the best languages to possibly swear in. It's so forceful, just kind of get it out of your system.
Yeah.
So, that's okay.
Yeah. The driving part, just one comment on this one.
Sure.
Went to Europe recently, and we had a road trip. So we rented a car in Paris, and we went to Italy, Tuscany, then south of France, and go back to Paris.
Right.
So basically, and then because I ride my motorcycle here in Singapore.
Okay.
Here it's a bit like a video game when you do this and people do that.
Right.
Compared to most of the places like small towns and villages and highways in Europe. But actually, in Paris, if you want to compare Singapore, I think you need to compare it with big cities, with London or with Paris.
Yeah.
You don't compare it with a village.
Not at all.
People are so relaxed and nice, and the lifestyle is completely different. The driving habits is different.
Yes.
In Paris, there are a lot of assholes. Paris is one of my favorite cities in the world, just a disclaimer. But there are a lot of assholes on the road.
Right.
And I think it's hard to drive or ride a bike in most of the big towns. Like in New York, it can be harsh.
I've rented bikes in, City Bike in New York, and I was with my girlfriend at the time who was Korean, and she was freaking out. And because, it wasn't built with bike lanes in mind, but yeah, it's pretty harrowing.
Yeah. You ride the motorcycle?
I do.
Yeah. Which one?
Not a big one.
Yeah.
So I drive a modified Vespa GT 200. So, but I've souped up the engine a bit. I'm not going to say how. And then a couple paint jobs later, and I've customized it a bit.
Nice.
I had a car for 10 years. I had a BMW for 10 years as well. I still found myself driving the Vespa a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then taking out the car only if I had to do errands and this. And I'm going, why am I paying so much money, for this car when I'm driving the motorbike most of the time?
Yeah.
And it is urban driving here, right? So it's like you don't really need a car unless you have a family and stuff like this. The rain's a hassle, and you're driving a motorbike too. And
rain is fine, actually.
but it's okay because it's usually not whole day.
And it's short distance normally, so you need like 20 minutes, 30 minutes maximum from point A to point B.
Maximum.
And then you can plan. If you see the rain, so don't
they have the
ride,
radar.
take a taxi.
Right.
So it's like,
it's not so bad.
Yeah,
so I ditched the car last year. The COE was up, and I was like, it's not even worth it,
Yeah.
So I kept the bike and got that souped up a little bit more. And the bike's already 20 years old. I just renewed COE like last week or something. So
how much is COE now? Mine?
For my bike I paid, I want to say it was under 10, like around 9.5, something like this.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy because I bought it new 20 years ago for 8.5. So here's a 20-year-old bike, and I'm paying more for a COE than I did to buy a new, and that's kind of like, and that's another thing about Singapore. I mean, just complaining a little bit. It's like, and this is where I'm Singaporean. Is people go, oh, Singapore's so clean, and the taxes are so low, and taxes, your income tax is low, about a month's salary, right? Everything else is taxed, like big time. So it's like you don't pay necessarily the tax on your income, but you're paying a lot of tax with food, beverages, a beer here compared to a beer in Bulgaria or in Paris, or, it's quite different. And that's another thing about going home. It's, you could buy wine, you can buy a 6-pack and of the same brands and everything here. And it's like so much cheaper. And you're like, my God, things are really, really expensive here.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to driving and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, a motorbike is, if you can have both, a car and a motorbike, that's the best of all worlds.
Are you PR here, by the way?
I'm not PR.
Not PR?
No, I've never.
26 years?
27 years. I've never applied.
Wow.
Yeah. I know.
So you just renew your EP, employment pass, like every 3 years?
Something like that.
That's it?
Yeah. The main reason was because, so when I lived here at the beginning, here's a big difference too.
Yeah.
So they were handing out like PR, like candy for a while and stuff like this. And I thought it would kind of always be like that. So it was never, whatever. And I didn't know how long I'd be here. I was always kind of trying to find my vibe here. And then the other thing is I decided to try to invest my own money. I thought I could do a little bit better than the CPF here.
Yeah.
And I did for a while. I had investor friends, and I was getting some help with them and this kind of stuff. So that was kind of my take. But yeah, I mean, if I would have done CPF from the beginning here, it may be a lot better. But I mean, there's no regrets. I mean, my position and my kind of work here, playing in the symphony and stuff like this. I mean, I'm secure, so it's not like I have to worry about it. But I mean, I have thought if something happens, and you do feel more like a foreigner without a PR for sure. I don't know. It's something I'm still considering, but it's not. To me, it's never been as big a deal as everybody kind of makes it to be. I don't know why. Why do you think people make it into this thing?
I know many people who's been living here with just on employment pass for a long time.
Yeah.
And unless you do something like wrong, the crime or something,
right?
There will be, and if you're doing fine, you're making money, there is a high chance your EP will be extended like forever, basically.
Right.
And PR thing here also, it's not like permanent residency in, let's say, in Europe. Mm-hmm. In Europe, if you get permanent residence, it's like forever,
right?
Unlimited. Here's 5 years, and then
I didn't know that. Yeah.
And then after 5 years, you basically need to renew.
Right.
And if you were out of the country for a long time, or if you like switch, so there is a chance that you don't review your PR.
You totally just reminded me. I forgot that even after 5 years, you still. You just reminded me that was also a big part of the decision. What's the difference between 3 years and 5 years necessarily?
I think the main thing for PR, you can send your kids to local school. You can buy HDB on the secondary market.
Right.
So this kind of thing, CPF.
Right.
So basically, from money perspective, if you know how to use these things, and if you're like going to buy HDB and you send your kids to local school, it kind of makes sense. So you can save a lot of money.
Yeah.
Hey guys, a very quick one. If you live in Singapore or are planning to move there, can you answer a few questions that will help me to understand what content about Singapore you want more? For you, it will just take 5 minutes of your time, but for me, it will mean the world. The link in the description. Thank you so much.
Can you compare being a musician in Singapore and in the US? If you can.
No, now we can talk about something I really know about.
Yeah.
The first thing is, like we talked about before, is geography. It's very small here.
Yeah.
Singapore has a lot of arts organizations, but I would have to say the quality in general probably isn't the highest. And that's not putting down the other arts organizations. It's not putting down my orchestra or anything like this. It's a bit isolated. And I think like in the States, the bar is so high, the quality is so high, and then you have so much venues and arts and organizations and stuff like this that I think that kind of keeps raising the bar. And they can pay a lot more too, because unlike Europe, actually I think it's only America, the arts, you can get private funding and stuff like this. And I'm not saying you can't in other places, but here it's very much dependent on the government. Not entirely, at least with my orchestra. But definitely the other arts organizations with the National Arts Council, they help support the other things. I wouldn't say it necessarily compares on a global stage. I think the orchestra, I mean, I'm biased, of course, but I think the orchestra is, it was actually listed as one of the top orchestras in the world. And that's another thing that always gets me about Singapore. They don't realize that, not just the orchestra, but there are some really great arts here, really, really great. There's some great musicians, there's some great artists, all kinds of stuff.
Like locals and foreigners.
Locals and foreigners, all of it. And they don't really realize that here. I don't know, maybe it's a PR thing or something like this, but in America, the arts organizations, like if you're in Boston Symphony or New York Philharmonic or something like this, the status is quite high, and the level is quite high. And it is very international, very cosmopolitan, can pay very, very well. Here, you're kind of capped, because because Singapore, at the end of the day, is a democratic socialist country. Unless you're in finance or in something else, some kind of investing or whatever, property, everything's kind of evened out.
The industry in the US is huge, so there is no ceiling probably for musicians.
There is a ceiling still, but I mean, like, you can be concertmaster in the Metropolitan Opera, you're getting $500,000. If you're a music director of Chicago Symphony, you're getting millions of dollars, and if you're a principal player in one of these big orchestras, you're getting hundreds of thousands of dollars US a year,
What is the equivalent in Singapore would be?
There's no real equivalent.
Let's say if you're a musician
Yeah.
and if you're like top musician, what would be the range of for the salary?
Well, I mean, I think I'm at one of the people at the top here. It's comparable to maybe not the top in America, but it's comparable to the better orchestras in America for sure.
Like 300, 400, something like that.
Thousand a year?
Thousands? Yeah.
No, not that much.
200?
Not that much either. It's a little bit less. But the thing
Yeah.
is that those orchestras, again, like when I was in Boston, I went to New England Conservatory of Music in Boston. The Boston Symphony plays like 3, sometimes 4 concerts a week. So and these people are constantly in 1 week they're playing these amount of performances, yet they're still trying to rehearse and practice for the next week's concerts.
Yeah.
So it's quite a lot to do, and so they get paid quite well. Only these top ones. The rest, it's like a huge gap. It's either like really well paying or like very low. There's no real middle. And I think where the SSO comes in, it would be more middle, upper middle.
It's like in sport.
Yeah.
So you have like top players. They make some millions. And then you have
Yes.
a lot of like that.
Yes. It's kind of a gap. And in the arts, it's exactly like that. Yeah. But in Singapore, the plus side is that you get a lot of time off. So you don't have to do 3 or 4 concerts a week. Sometimes yes, sometimes more, but it's not the average. It's not the norm. And then you have, because it's a multicultural city, you get a lot of time off because of all the holidays.
Yeah.
I just got back from a month holiday in the U.S. You get time off and you get time to travel. So that, for me, that was the most attractive part about staying here.
Yeah.
Was the money to time off ratio. You do have to think about economics, and I am a foreigner at the end of the day. But I'm doing everything I've always wanted to do. Teach at one of the top conservatories in Asia, playing to me, the top orchestra in Asia, in one beautiful hall, but I just didn't know it would be Singapore. But it is. And the good thing about being a musician too is that, I know your channel deals with expats and stuff like this, but I think at least at the professional level orchestral musician, we're all kind of cosmopolitan in a way because we're playing music. We've always studied music from mostly Europe, but all over the world, and soloists from all over the world, conductors from all over the world. You have to try to understand the history of the music from all over the world and how it came into be, and all this kind of stuff. And also we do a lot of touring.
How audience perceive and react to your play, to your performance? Let's say in Japan, in Australia, and in Singapore.
That's a great question. My 2 favorite countries in the world to perform are Germany and Japan. They really know the music, they really listen, and especially in Japan, you can hear a pin drop. And also in Germany and Japan, the concert halls are generally really, really great. In England, they're not necessarily so great, but and a lot of classical music is from Germany, so it just kind of works, you can kind of feel the history, especially there, and again, the audiences know it. Japan is just one of the best audiences ever. I mean, they really listen, and then after concerts, they ask for autographs. You don't have to be famous or anything; they just want a remembrance of the performance and stuff like this.
Yeah.
So. Those are my 2 favorite. You feel the kind of gravitas of the situation, especially when you're doing hard repertoire and stuff like this, because you know that they know it.
Yeah.
And they're not just there for entertainment. They want to be somehow enriched by it. Definitely, I've seen from the stage there is. Well, I'll say the good part. The good part is that I told you we're almost full capacity every single concert, which is not the case in any U.S. orchestra.
Oh wow.
It's amazing. And also the audience here, the average age is like in the mid-30s. Right? The average age in America, I mean,
older,
you look, everybody's got white and blue hair, everybody's old, and I think that's an amazing thing. And so when I come back here after, spending time with my musician friends back in the US, I feel how lucky I am to be a part of this organization and to have helped build this orchestra. Being a principal player for so long, I was originally brought in when we had a new music director, Lan Shui, and he was going to try to revamp the orchestra, and he kind of got a few of us from the States to come here. And of course had an audition and stuff. I mean, I think for my job there's probably close to 80 to 100 people who auditioned, international. And they did auditions in New York and Berlin and all these other places and stuff like this. And it's super competitive. I got it. And so since I've been here, it's very unlike an institution like New York or Boston, like I was talking about before, which are very old, right? 1800s, mid 1800s, even earlier. You're not a part of really building that orchestra. You're part of a tradition,
Okay,
and you can build
okay.
upon that tradition.
Yes.
But here didn't really have a tradition.
Yeah.
And so I think we're at the point in this orchestra where we've come to top international, not just international, but I think top 10 international. And to help to be a part of forming that, of hiring and being a part of the audition process, listening to people and this kind of stuff. That part's a privilege that I would never be able to get anywhere else. And tied to that, to imagine being a city like you love Paris. Paris has been Paris long before you've been there.
Yeah.
The art scene, of course, the cultural scene. I mean, it's the philosophical, everything. Singapore, it's amazing to be a part of this orchestra building here, and also the city building. How much this has changed in the last almost 30 years, at least since I've been here. It is an amazing thing to see. You don't really get to see that anywhere else in the world. And again, I think that kind of feedback loops into how you feel in the arts, how you feel as an artist. You feel kind of tied into the fabric of the place, and you want to give back to the citizens. And I think as a performer, it's not about hubris, it's not about being self-indulgent, which musicians can be, but it's about sharing your love and your passion and your philosophy. And I think to be an artist, and this ties into kind of living as an expat and everything else, you have to have a story to tell, you have to have a philosophy. Right? You have to be a good observer, and you have to filter that through your intuition and how you feel, and then somehow make that into a story. That's how orchestras are tied to their cities too. Cities are also very time and space, a lot of movement, a lot of working parts and stuff like this. And an orchestra can kind of be a reflection of the city. So having the orchestra develop in the way it has, and seeing Singapore as a city develop the way it has, even playing in this concert hall. I remember going in the concert hall when they were just building it. They invited a few of us, and it was just cool to be. I mean, where else would I be a part of that? And now the Esplanade is this iconic, fly-eyed Durian building. But it's been very cool to unknowingly at the time, but be a part of this kind of whatever's happening here. It's very exciting, and I appreciate that when I go back home. And I'm like, Singapore is a special place. I go back to Washington, D.C., and it's like, man, this isn't my town. Family's lived in D.C. near D.C. since '84. I don't feel a real connection with that. But here, I really feel connected to. And I also do wildlife photography, and I told you I dive in the region, so I've gotten to really understand kind of how the ecosystem works and the nature and stuff. And I think understanding that kind of really puts it in it's just a magical place to be. In that sense, yeah. So my take as an expat is it's really not from here for like 2 years to make as much money as possible and network and do this kind of stuff and then put on my white linen shirt, go to Bali and whatever. Mine's more of like just kind of observing, being a part of something that's organic and trying to filter that into sound somehow. And then the audience is here. I think a lot are getting better at listening. With the younger audiences so there are people that come to the audience that are really just for the optics, to show off for the date and stuff like this. I've had finance friends and they want to take us just to show off. They had a friend who's in the orchestra and it's like, oh yeah, that happens here. So there is this kind of like fake plastic part of Singapore, which is that's kind of part and parcel with any kind of
big city or oriented
financial city, where there's big money and stuff like this.
Yeah.
And even when I first moved here, there was like people in the orchestra. They're like, because I would complain, and they were like, just make money. Just make money. And I was like, how can you just make money? Don't you want to like have a quality of life? Don't you want to like, be a part of something?
Yeah.
So I'm glad I haven't lost that part.
Yeah.
And I'm glad those people are not here. But before me, I'm sure it was probably more like that.
What do musicians normally do after the concert? It depends.
Drink.
Drink. Are they?
At least I do.
They get together, or you kind of meet friends, or like let's say you invite someone into the performance, and then let's say you go together for drinks.
Yeah, often. Usually just right here.
Yeah.
So Harry's over here. It's the closest to the backstage door. People don't realize that. So we can go through a private way, and it's literally just door to door. And Yeah, you just go there and just musicians will show up. Even our music director, Hans Graf, he'll be there after some concerts with friends and stuff like this. So it's not necessarily planned, but you do have, I have some very close friends in the orchestra, of course. We plan like, oh, we're gonna have a beer afterward or something like this. Other people will go out, have their places to go get hot pot and this kind of stuff, maybe away from here. But at least for me and some of my colleagues, I mean, being a brass player especially, we like to just kind of hang around and just drink and this kind of stuff. So. And it's a lot of stress to play concerts. When you're having thousands of ears, and everything's on you, and you have something big, and you don't want to blow it. But say you did really great, you want to celebrate a little bit, and you should, because sometimes it can be very high stress, and it's just something I think it's kind of just part of the fabric of being a musician in general. You start that pretty young, even as a student. So, and I still do it to this day.
Hey guys, just a quick announcement. Don't skip. I'll be running a 3-day workshop called Fast Track to Views and Profits on YouTube. If you ever wanted to start your own channel, this is the best way to do it. You will learn how to choose the most profitable niche and how to beat the YouTube algorithm. You're gonna love it, I promise. Link in description, so sign up if it's for you. And now back to the video.
Speaking about the developing a taste for classical music, any advice for adult who've never been really into like classical music, how to get into it and start enjoying it?
Well, I think the first thing is to realize that people already do enjoy it, because you watch movies, and you hear like a John Williams score, you watch the original Star Wars, not the Acolyte or anything, but all these old movies, the first Jurassic Parks, the Harry Potters, whatever. I mean, the music is the mood. I mean, Jaws wouldn't be Jaws without the music, right?
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate to play with John Williams back when I was in Boston and stuff like that. So, but anyway, that's besides the point. But people do already like music; they just don't know it, and because it's tied into the entertainment that they're already watching.
Like
right?
Interstellar,
or like Interstellar. Yeah, we did a Hans Zimmer program last year, even. And people don't notice it, right? Because they're involved with the whole. But imagine watching the movie without that music. It's
completely different.
It's completely different. So it's still in us, right? So it's already there. So how do you cross that bridge into more mainstream audiences coming to concerts and stuff like this? Is I think like the orchestra this week, I'm not playing in the orchestra's playing this week. I'm not playing in the orchestra this week. There's outreach concerts, and Singapore Symphony is great with this. I think most orchestras do some kind of outreach concerts, go to different parts of the community. Today was a lunchtime concert that's free for the public. Over at Victoria Concert Hall, and I think maybe going to some of these free performances, seeing how you feel. Usually it's very good repertoire. It's a little bit more upbeat, a little bit more exciting, I think being in a large acoustic space with a bunch of acoustic instruments, with people making the sounds with their own bodies, with the help of their instruments, but no amplification, no electricity. There is something tangible to the audience there. So you don't have to be. I think the big folly is that people think you have to read up and study, and it's like, oh, it's going to hurt my brain, to go. And the other part is that people are like, it's so boring, puts me to sleep. And I'll be honest, I have seen some people dozing off in concert, depending on the repertoire. Yeah. But
are musicians like during the performance? Are they looking at the audience? They see what's going on?
No. I mean, everybody's a little bit different how they approach, right? But usually how it works is that the bright lights are on you, and they dim the lights on the audience, so it's pretty dark. There's two ways you can connect with the audience. There was a pianist named Arthur Rubinstein, right? Very great pianist. He died a long time ago. He was friends with Einstein and stuff. Lived a long time ago. Really great, known for Chopin and this kind of stuff. But anyway, when he would do a recital at Carnegie Hall, as soon as he would walk on stage, they clap, he'd walk on stage before the first note. He would do a bow, look at the audience. He would find the prettiest girl, and then he'd go to play. The whole concert was for her. So even though there's all these people, it's just for her. So that's how he dealt with it. There's some audiences that play for or some musicians that play for the audience. I'm more of the mind to invite in. So, and I play an instrument that can play very quiet, but it can play very loud as well. When the exciting loud parts happen, I get a sense of the hall and I feel it, but it's more about filling the hall, right? And just filling everybody's head with my sound. That's how I connect with the audience. But in terms of an individual, not so much. It's more of an inviting in. So it's more like a spotlight's on you, even though the spotlight's on the stage, and you want to invite them more in. And I think the best musicians know how to invite in, even if you don't want to. as an audience member. They can bring you in. So it's understanding this kind of, you were talking about vibes before, and I think musicians have to be very sensitive to these vibes. And also because as much as you've rehearsed, and this is even with conductors and stuff like this, you have to be able to also fit the moment. You know, you can't just be a robot, or else everybody just listens to recordings. And I think this is where classical music's a bit different. I mean, I'm an audiophile too. I love great recordings and stuff like this, but nothing beats a live performance. You know, and like it doesn't matter what genre you play. Or listen to.
You know what's also enjoyable? When you see musicians really enjoying themselves playing.
Absolutely.
That's the best part.
Absolutely.
And it adds a lot of like the points to
right. I mean, exactly. I mean, music is so empathetic from the musician standpoint, right? You have to feel the humanness to tell that story, and I think that's part of the inviting. And I think humans, by nature, unless you're a psychopath or something or a narcissist, you're going to be caught in that wave. Especially, it's kind of like, you know, the most magical moments happen when sometimes there's music and it's just. You can have a full hall, right? Almost over 1,800 people here, and the music just kind of turns into silence, and you can hear a pin drop, you can hear a whisper, and you just feel that energy, especially at the end of something that's been very deep, you know, like Mahler's Ninth Symphony. You almost can't breathe. It's like, for me, it's better than, it's church. It's church in a different way. It's a humanist church, and it's in the psychology of our deepest psyche, you know, and I think that part's the fun part.
Speaking about the kids, so here in Singapore they send kids to either to piano or to violin. We did the same actually. We sent our daughter when she was 5 or 6 to piano.
You're right.
So she had it for maybe half a year, and then the teacher, Russian teacher, she was like super strict, and kind of our daughter was stressed, so we kind of pulled her out of this, but still she does a little bit of flute. I'm kind of maybe thinking to send her for drums because I like drums. What's the right approach, or what's like your thinking, like how to approach the music class with children?
Very simple. I've always thought you don't choose music chooses you. I feel like if you're in a good school system, if you're in a good enough community, if you show some kind of ability. I don't know how it is with kids these days, but at least where I grew up, there was music classes and stuff like this. And so part of me really starting 12, 13 was having music teachers kind of notice some things, you know, from music class to starting to play an instrument, and then them noticing some things, and then they direct you in the right way. If you're up for it, you start doing competitions. And then you start winning competitions, say, and then it just kind of blooms from there. But I think it's not something that the parents should ever force on a kid. There is a lot of.
So let's say 7-year-old kid or 6-year-old kid has to enjoy it, because there is a fine line between like you kind of have to force yourself to do it, but then also you kind of have to kind of enjoy it.
Right.
So
well, you can enjoy it and not want to practice, right?
Exactly, yeah. That's
but if they enjoy it, I think that's the important part. And if you're in the right environment and people can kind of edge you on, maybe listen to a few more things, you know, have some music on during dinner, or you know, whatever, or go to one of these outreach concerts, and bring your kids. The children's outreach concerts are always completely packed, and see how the kids feel then, you know. If they don't feel anything, then they don't feel anything. But you know, they don't have to necessarily be 6 or 7. You can start later. You don't always have to start like 4 and this kind of stuff. And especially my instrument, if you're 6 or 7, it's too big. You just can't play the instrument. I mean, when I was young, of course, I started on violin. It was smaller, but you know, when I couldn't even play the full instrument when I was a little kid. So I think that's why I developed long arms now to help with that. It's funny, you know, you look at double bass players and they're usually pretty big people. It's like does a person choose an instrument? Like I don't know how, you know, even all these years, I'm like, how does that work exactly?
Like basketball players.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but piano's a great one, because piano is like, you know, unlike most every other instrument pretty much. It's like, except for percussion instruments and stuff. Even though piano is a percussion instrument. You see all the keys, everything's right there. So you can kind of see how it works. You can see how the music theory kind of works, how chords work, how, you know, so you have a visual along with that. And you still need piano skills no matter what instrument you play, just for the theory part, understand how it works together. You have to be able to play a little bit. So, I mean, that is a good place to start, I gotta say. Violin, not necessarily, but even violinists, I mean, you have to have some piano skills. But if people just really don't love it, then it's not for them. And you should never force it on them, because then they can develop a disdain and not want to do it for the rest of their life and not want to go to concerts. They have a bad stigma with this, you know. I do think music chooses you as opposed to you choose music. And if you're going to really take it far, I think it has to be kind of the right mix of personality meets everything else.
Do you have any main principle in life, something really important for you that you kind of learned or developed through the years of your career or personal life? Something like some principle.
Be kind. You know, be kind to yourself first. Have compassion with yourself first. For me, this is where my music life and personal life kind of has tied in together. Is that I can be very hard on myself. I can be a bit perfectionist, and if I don't get exactly what I want, I start to come down on myself.
Yeah.
Anger, frustration, this kind of stuff. And sometimes it can filter out into other people. But I think being kind to yourself, especially when you're trying to attain something better, especially if you want to improve. I don't think you necessarily have to be nice to be kind, you know. Sometimes there's hard truths with yourself and with other people. But I think kindness is my mantra these days. And forgiveness, self-forgiveness. See how it always comes from, I think it really has to come from inside first before you can just go out. That's kind of the rule that I live by that I wish I really understood more when I was younger. My dad always used to say, empathy, you know, understand other people, like imagine how they're feeling. It's different than sympathy, you know. Sympathy, I don't always have sympathy, you know, that's dependent on a case by case.
Yeah.
But that's in short supply for me. But empathy is the important one.